Greetings, virtual reality. So I was listening to a podcast, healer who does Zoom healing, and she was saying she wasn't sure about the connection with the moon, with menstruation, or maybe I can't remember who said this actually, but yeah, basically the radical anthropology research group that I've been studying focuses on the key importance of the moon in the evolution of modern humans, and this idea of that the female. Oh, do I gotta close the door? Anyway, the female menstruation is synchronized with the lunar cycle as a group. Female strike, labor strike against the males to then enforce a one man monogamy relationship for long term hunting by the males, and also to ensure the males help in feeding the female, providing meat for iron. Greetings. Feel free to join in with questions or comments as I free associate as usual. So, in the Taoist meditation, you focus on the moon. There's a moon meditation, which is also the focus of the book Taoist Yoga, Alchemy, and Immortality. So there's, I think it's chapter 6, where they go into the moon and sun meditation. So what I'm finding is that in the Western sort of like spiritual, whatever, new age kind of scene, there's a big emphasis on the Vedic um, yugas and the Mayan solar calendar. Um, and the problem with this is that it ignores the lunar energy, the lunar focus. So, for example, in the New World in North America, the lunar calendar was the focus of um, Native American cultures, indigenous cultures, and even early farming by the Europeans relied on the lunar calendar also for planting, harvesting, and stuff. So obviously, as like patriarchal farming with plows developed around the world, then there was a focus more on the solar calendar. So then you have like the Vedic yugas are based on the solar calendar. And so people try to forecast the future of Earth, based on this solar calendar. And then they ignore the lunar calendar. They even try to denigrate the moon, like David Icke. He tries to denigrate the moon, and some people in the New Age community are trying to say the moon must be artificial or something like that because it's synchronized with the Earth in terms of the distance of the Earth being the same size that blocks the sun. Greetings. Feel free to join in with a question or comment. And so the thing about the lunar energy is that it's the yin chi energy or psychic energy. So it's also the earth energy in terms of it being yin chi. And but in terms of the Jing, it's actually yang Jing. So in Taoism, you have the Jing, which is the life force or neural hormones. And so, like in a lot of, like in Australian Aboriginal culture, they consider the moon to be male. Well, why is that? Because in terms of the Jing, it's actually male, because the Yin Qi is based on females being yang internally. In other words, the energy of the moon. Um, this is why the oldest spiritual training, the oldest ritual, is called the Elan Bowl ritual, and it's based on the first menstruation of the female at the new moon, and then um, the gnome energy is considered strongest in people by the female at first menstruation. So in the original human culture, the San Bushmen, one of the rituals is that the female has to initiate the males by having a physical contact with the male reproductive organ, and the male then has to train to take in the female energy and sublimate it through dancing. And so when the female sings, the female is sending out that Jing energy that's actually yin qi. So it's male Jing. So the lunar energy is male as Jing, as life force energy, but then it's female as qi. It's yin qi. So the yang Jing is yin qi. And that's why you have the whole yin yang dynamic, because you have this change between Jing into Qi, and then the yang Qi turns into Yin Shen. So there's this constant like flow of you could call it a change of the frequency, but the thing about frequency is that's a Western concept that assumes symmetry. So whenever somebody says frequency, like we got to have a higher frequency, they're already in this Western matrix mind control from Platonic philosophy, because the whole even the concept of frequency is wrong in the West, because it's assuming this symmetric spatial measurement that's external. But in actuality, frequency originally was defined by time that you can't see. So, for example, Jose Arguelles, who he was mentioned by in Mark Steves podcast recently, I sent him an email. I'm like, well, I debunked Jose Arguelles, in my 2012 book, and he's like, well, what's your point? And I go, oh, thanks for asking, because and I gave him all the quotes from my book, because he had interviewed me about my book supposedly, but of course, people don't read books, so. And my book is not an easy read; it's more like a reference book. And so anyway, Jose Arguelles, his whole thing is about this time lunar cycle, but he defines the time based on scalar, and scalar is a symmetric spatial measurement. So, and he's inspired by Oliver Reiser. So the whole New Age scene of like harmonic convergence of the Mayan calendar at 2012 and blah blah blah, it's all still based on this Western scalar definition of time as a symmetric spatial measurement. And so they get the lunar calendar wrong. They get the whole concept wrong. And since people don't question the very basic concept of how do you define time in terms of frequency, and what does it mean in terms of like spatial measurement, because it's actually like really basic music theory. And if you don't question the process of listening versus an external measurement of an instrument, of a musical instrument, then you're not going to notice this basic paradox in music theory. And it's something I noticed when I was 15 years old studying at McPhail. My piano teacher, she taught adult music theory, and she asked me if I wanted to attend her class. And so it was that night, and I'm like 15, but right away I'm like, well, wait a second, why can't C to F be a perfect fifth? I mean, it is a perfect fifth as an undertone, but it's not allowed in Western music tuning. And so here I am. I, I discovered something. I knew it was empirically true that C to F is a perfect fifth as an undertone, but based on Western music tuning, it's not allowed. So like they created a symmetric spatial measurement. And so then I asked my other music teacher at the time, and he was actually married to my piano teacher. They got married when I was, well, I'm not going to go into their private life, but at any rate, she allowed, I was able to take classes with him, and he was a former university music professor. And yeah, so he's like, well, that's just logarithms, and then so I'm like, okay, so now all of a sudden I'm challenging the logarithmic basis of Western music tuning. And I'm realizing it goes against the empirical truth of music based on the overtones and undertones as defined by time and frequency. And and I realized that this would cause an overlap of the future and the past, and so I said to my piano teacher, I said, I think that this Pythagorean music tuning is the secret of harmonizing all of reality. And they didn't, I'm just a kid, right? I was like 15, but they started to give me these music mystic books, like I think there was one called The Great Composers or something like that, and it was about Brahms and basically the supposed mysticism. Apparently, it turned out the book wasn't really accurate. I can't remember the details, but um, they and then my private instructor, he taught me ear training and orchestration and music composition and voice. What do you call it? Well, I guess that's the ear training. But anyway, um, he gave me a copy of the Tao Te Ching and also Gregory Bateson's book Mind and Nature. And so my first year at college, that's what he sent me off to college with, those books. And I was studying those books, and I didn't realize that it was all connected. And then when I took quantum physics my first year of college, I'm like, wait a second, that's the same logical paradox that they're calling non-locality in quantum physics as this time frequency paradox in music tuning. And I didn't tell anybody about it. Well, I wrote a letter home about it, and I documented. I put it on my blog. Hey, Irma. um. So okay, you can chime in with Moon's magic, since you're Yang internally. Howdy, good to hear from you. Um. So okay, at any rate, oh, actually, I have a strange story about this. My best friend, when I was 2 years old, was this girl who lived a block away, like half a block away. And one of my earliest memories is me saying her name and saying, "Why don't you come over and play?" And I'm from the other side of the street, and I coaxed her over, and she was a year older than me. And then her mom stood us on the street corner and taught us to look before we cross the street. You have to look to the left first and the right, and then the left again, and then you cross the street. And then they moved away, and And I totally, I forgot about her. And then, all right, good to hear. Anyway, so when I went off to Hampshire College, it turned out she was going to the Hampshire College also, and she was a year ahead of me. And it's really weird because it's a very small school and it's a experimental college because there's no grades and it's self-designed learning. So I'm like, what are the odds that both of us would go to the same school, after last seeing each other when we were 2 years old, when I was two and she was three. And so she was really nice to me. And then her mom gave me this book called Time and the Art of Living. And I was a real nerd, obviously, just hanging out, just reading on my own and writing, composing music. And she invited me to an event. We went to a cabin in the what do you call it? The Northeast, I don't know, New England cabin up in, like, I don't know, New Hampshire, Vermont or something. And I just stayed in the cabin composing music. And she went off out with their friends and they did crazy stuff together. And I didn't, I didn't, but Kismet. Oh, is that the, I forgot what Kismet means. Okay, so I'm reading Time and the Art of Living, my first year of college. And oh, okay. Yeah, fate, destiny, right? And anyway, so that sort of, I don't remember what that book was really about, but that definitely got me thinking about, well, what does time really mean anyway? And so yeah, in terms of the lunar energy, what happens is that when you open up the pineal gland, um then Qigong master, right? Yeah, Qigong Master Trini Lin said that 3 days before and after the full moon, the meditation is 10 times stronger. Oh, speaking of which, when is the full moon this month? I think it's coming up August. Yeah, it's August 9th, so it's exactly 3 days before the full moon. What do you know? I guess I got lucky. Um, so what happens is that I noticed that this strong magnetic bliss when the full moon, like, I wouldn't know when it was in the calendar, but I would start to realize it based on the feeling. Ah, so you have the same thing. Yeah, I have that too. It keeps me awake, but I can't tell because I've been drinking a lot of cocoa at night because cocoa has tryptamine in it. It has high levels of tryptamine. It turns out if you have enough cocoa, the tryptamine will give you, like DMT, psychedelic dreams. Ah, okay, you actually saw it. Ah, another one. Welcome. All right. So yeah, that's exactly what happens is that you can feel this. I feel a strong magnetic bliss in the center of my brain during the full moon. 3 days before and after, around there. But I have not been meditating as much, hardly at all, actually, lately. I try to meditate in the morning, if I have time. If I wake up early enough, I do a small universe meditation. I've been especially during the summertime because the energy is more yang, and when you meditate, that's another thing about the moon. Like, there's a Tai Chi symbol. It's on my blog. Let me see if I can find it. But basically, during the wintertime, the moon energy is stronger based on the Tai Chi. The Tai Chi symbol originated from tracking the moon and solar calendar. Let me see here. Oh, sorry, I got pulled into virtual reality here. Okay, another layer of virtual reality. I was meditating, looking up at stars, planets, and flying lights, but the full moon was blinding. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool when you get that Cat Stevens experience. Okay, let me see if I can find it. It might be on my older blog. I think it's on my older blog. I have the Tai Chi symbol. That's the lunar. Yeah, I think it's in my older blog. Um, yeah. Okay, so let me go to my other blog. Oops. View. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So basically, like the during the winter, the lunar energy is stronger, and see, the whole point is to activate, like like Peter Kingsley, he did his PhD in Pythagorean philosophy, and the secret of the Pythagorean philosophy is you do the cave meditation, and so you have to have that darkness at first to first build up your lunar energy. And what the lunar energy is, it's the yin chi. So you have to return, like with our eyes open, the okay, the yang shen, the spirit as shen is yang when we meditate, but it's connected with yin chi. It has yin chi with it. Okay. Yeah, the voice is the yang jing, which is also yin chi. You can feel that too. Like after that was another thing after you know, my enlightenment experience, I noticed that I could feel the energy from females singing like live, like you could feel that energy. And so it changed my experience of music because music became a like a you could feel the energy behind the music. Kind of it's hard to kind of explain. But that's the other thing is like in this traditional culture, the original human culture, they say that the yeah, like the younger females, they have this stronger energy. So they're in that Elan Bowl ritual. What they say is the female turns into the male bull. That's then the Elan bull. That's then hunted by the hunters. And so the reason the female turns into the Elan bull male is because the Elan bull male has the most fat around the heart, and that fat is actually the Jing energy because that's your neural hormones. And so, like if you fast, you convert to what do you call it, ketosis. And so when you're burning that fat, your Jing energy gets really strong. You'll get a really like my voice will get super deep because your testosterone really kicks in. And then of course for female humans, they go into menopause, the females do, to help what the anthropologists call it the grandmother effect, to help raise the young. So when they turn, like, I don't know, 50 years old, that's like the average age to become a grandmother. Hey, nice. I have a friend who just did a 3-day fast also that yeah, exactly. I haven't been able to fast lately because I've been my mom, she's turning, she likes me to stick around. I used to go up to my land up north, and I would go when I first bought the land, I would go up there for like 5 days nonstop, and I'd be fasting the whole time, meditating. And the strongest energy I ever had was when I fasted for a week, with no water. Well, I had a half a glass of water. That's the thing about yoga, is they call it virgin kung fu. And so people don't realize that you're leveraging your neural hormones, which is like your natural, like, reproductive energy. You're leveraging that. So what happened with me is that after I opened up the third eye, then I burned it all off. I burned off I maintained physical celibacy, but I didn't maintain mental celibacy. So in other words, the yin chi energy is also psychic energy, and that's what powers reproductive reaction for both males and females. It's just that Western modern people don't realize that. So like with the psychic vampires, like this whole thing with Epstein and Drumpf, what happens is that Ghislaine Maxwell, she called them nubiles, and she would go and search out nubiles. She's like, I got to go get nubiles, and every day she would try to get two new. She'd call them fresh faces, and she'd go out to find a fresh face. She would literally like run across the street if she saw a young, nubile, and then she would coax them back into, becoming a model or whatever, or giving a massage or whatever it was. And so since they're young, their glum energy is really strong. And so then when they're massaging Epstein, he's sucking up their energy as a psychic vampire. And because he's feeding off their energy, then he wants to, do his patriarchal thing and assault them so he can, finish off what he's trying to do and just like eject that energy externally again as a low frequency, discharge, and assault the victim. And then he wants to do it again and feed off. It's a terrible thing, right? But that's what he did. And so people don't understand that the reason he was seeking out the nubiles is to literally like feed off that numb energy and then to just eject it. Whereas in yoga, what you're doing is you're storing up that energy as the lunar energy, what's called yin qi. And so when you meditate, like with your eyes open, the yin qi goes out of your eyes and you lose the yin qi. And so they say like one of the secrets to storing up energy is you have to flex your anal sphincter all the time, which is really weird because who would, like I know for me, I never think about, like, even if I remember to flex my anal sphincter, it's something I don't really want to do, but I don't have a choice. Like, if you overuse your energy, your yang qi or your yang jing or yin qi, then it easily goes up the front of your body and out of your eyes really easily. And so then, like for me, if somebody around me is tired, then all of a sudden I'll feel this internal tingling sensation, and that's the yin qi. It's like it's literally like negative ions, and so you feel like a buzzing sensation. Like when in music they call it what they call it, skin orgasm. It's the name for it in French. It's called skin orgasm, but it's called frisson. So that when you get that tingling sensation when you're listening to music. Yeah, well, this is the whole secret of tantra in yoga, is that for females, what happens is the heart energy gets opened up. So like in Western religion, it's very anti-female. So like in the Garden of Eden, you have the Kundalini energy, and that's the snake, right? So the snake taught if you read the book The Holy Science by Yukteswar, he talks about how the true meaning of the Garden of Eden, which actually is from Sumeria, and the original myth of the Garden of Eden in Sumeria was that the snake was actually good and was helping the woman, the female. And so with patriarchy, it got switched around. So now the female is the cause of original sin, and sin means the moon. That's the other thing, is the lunar energy, to bring it back to the moon, is the original meaning of sin. Sin was the moon god of Sumeria. So, for example, Michael Hudson, the economics professor Michael Hudson, his emphasis is that Jesus was focused on the Jubilee. The Jubilee year is where the debt is forgiven. So the financial wealth grows exponentially in terms of mathematics. Yeah, exactly. Right. But it originated as a Sumerian god, like the Babylonians got it from Sumeria or whatever. And so, well, this is my point: is that this is actually psychic energy. And so, originally, the god in Sumeria actually meant bull, Bull. And so, Brahman also means bull in Indo-European. The word God originates from bull. It means bull in Indo-European language. So we don't realize that the worship of God is actually originates from this Elan bull ritual originally, like from our original human culture. So, in other words, for females, if you're able to maintain that, like if you look at the bonobo primate culture, it's all based on female bliss, the reproductive reaction. But for females, that's what they use to maintain peace. And the females, they cooperate together as a group. And so, what the radical anthropology group argues, and this is, you can read Camilla Powers and Chris Knight. His book is called Blood Relations. And Jerome Lewis and Ian Watts, and also Megan Beatsley, and also Elizabeth Marshall Thomas. These are all PhD anthropologists, and they focus on the original human culture, either the San Bushmen or the Pygmies that separated 225,000 years ago based on the ancient DNA science. Yeah, in terms of the virtual photon, the secret of that is listening. And so, like in Vedic philosophy, Ramana Maharshi, he calls it the highest samadhi in yoga meditation is what he calls Muna Samadhi, which means silence samadhi. So, as Westerners, we're completely fixated on visual observation and external measurements and using technology and everything. But in our original human culture, the focus was on listening as music. And so Jerome Lewis, he has a great talk called the breath. That's what Yukteswar calls a breathless ecstasy. And so that's when you activate the yang qi. The yang qi is the what they call nirvikalpa samadhi. So I experienced this when I fasted for a week, just meditating the whole time. There's a good book called Tao and Longevity by Master Nan Huachen. And he gets into the psychophysiological experiences that you have as you start to open up the third eye. So basically, like for me, the kidneys got really hot, and then my thymus gland got really hot. So what you're doing is you're ionizing your neurohormones as you store up the yin qi charge, the lunar energy charge. Then the yang qi is then this would be considered the sun, but then it activates the moon in terms of the spirit, which is the yin shen. And that's considered the first half of alchemy training. Is the moon is the light that you see externally. So first you'll see it internally as a white yellow light, and then you'll see it externally as a white yellow light, as auras around people. But you can also see ghosts, and that's when I saw ghosts going to be healed by Chun Yi Lin. I didn't say anything to anybody, but Chen Yulin said, since somebody can see this, I'm going to explain what's happening. And I had seen these um, yellow lights shaped like humans, and they floated in from outside the room, and they were hovering around Chen Yulin as he sat in full lotus meditation. And I had read the biography of the most famous Buddhist meditation master in Thailand, and he had described the same experience where his name's Fra Archon Moon, and his book is free online. Anybody can read it. But he does the same thing as Chen Yulin, where he said that these dead humans as spirits would come to him regularly to get healed. And Chen Yulin said, he sends them back into the emptiness. So the question is, well, what would, how would you heal a ghost, or what, like, and it's all based on this yin qi blockage. So in the Taoist alchemy, what they say is that the blockage is based on the frequency of the light. So that's where you get into the virtual photon thing, because even the Sam Bushman talked about this in the original human culture. So they call it red light. So the blockage is the red light. And then when you see the blue light when you're meditating, that's the yang qi. The yang qi is being activated to then see your yin shen. And so the yang qi, the blue light is also the moonlight. The moonlight, and then the yin shen is the moon. Yeah. Well, that's sort of the paradox of yoga, is that, like, Ramana Maharshi says, he uses his spiritual ego to then access what they call non-dualism, and non-dualism is what we would call God, but they also call it the self in Indian yoga. So the self is Atman, which is your soul, which is also God as Brahman. Now, so the question is, how Ramana Maharshi describes it as a light that's so bright that you lose all self-awareness or self-consciousness. So, like in deep dreamless sleep, he says that it's just like deep dreamless sleep, but it's the exact opposite, in the sense that you access it through your spiritual ego as light, and the light is consciousness, but what they call formless awareness cannot be seen. And he said that as Westerners, they want to see God. They want to see God as a light, but he's like, it's not a light. Yeah, so what he's saying is that even though you have this light so bright that you lose self-awareness, like deep dreamless sleep, he's saying that that's actually not the origin of the light. The origin of the light is what he calls silence, samadhi, or formless awareness. And he says that's what Shakti is. So Shakti is this force that cannot be seen. And so our original human culture called it Num. Yeah, it's actually, well, they in Indian philosophy, they have different words for it. Like they call it Satchi Ananda, which would be like it's sort of beyond any perceptions. Uncreated light. Yeah, so see, this is why listening is so key, because there's a paradox, because you're using so Ramana Maharshi calls it sattva. So like in Indian philosophy, they have sattva, which is like your purification. You have the three gunas. So sattva is the most pure. Sattva is like the light. And that would be what they call yin or yang shen. It would be called shen. And then you have raha. Raha is like Yang Qi, and then you have Tamas. Tamas is Yin. So yeah, so the emptiness is beyond words, or what they call logical inference. It's also called vichara. So vichara means investigation, logical inquiry, or inference. So inference is actually listening. You know, like you can logically infer something. And you're listening to it because you can't. It's before it's like they've actually proven now that in written language, the appearance of the letters is based on how the sound of the word um feels. So like they call it the Bubakiki effect. So they found that in every language that's written down, the actual visual form of the word originates from the sound originally. So like obviously like Buba has that open sound, and then Kiki has that sharp sound, and so you can see like the physical appearance of the words. Well, it turns out that's true like in every written language. And so what it's showing is that there's the process of listening actually is faster. It's actually superluminal, that they've discovered, or this is what my research has been on, is that there's a secret to listening that enables you to access this superluminal force that's from the future. So you can listen to the future. There's a really good book called Transcendent Dreaming, and it's all about her precognitive dreams. And so that's where it gets really freaky, because if you meditate a lot, then you'll start getting dreams that are more vivid than being awake. And so they call that Tibetan dream yoga also. So then it's like, okay, what's the truth of reality? If you can have a dream that's more scintillating, more lucid than being awake, then what does it mean to be awake? Like right now, as I talk to you, what's really real? And so the argument in Indian philosophy or non-Western philosophy is that the truth of reality, it cannot be seen, and yet it's real, and also it can be logically inferred, so you can listen to it. And so it sounds really abstract, but if your whole culture is based on music and dancing as the focus and not based on like visual external measurement, then that process of a deep listening through music enables you to then access this energy. So at first, in terms of the lunar energy and the yin qi, you get like, it's pretty common for Western people, Westerners listening to music, they experience that tingling sensation, the chills, and they know when they experience it that's really good music. And so the French call it frisson, which means skin orgasm. That's literally the yin qi being activated. That's the lunar energy, the psychic energy. And what people don't realize that energy is the same energy of the Schumann resonance. But what's interesting about the Schumann resonance, it's not just negative ions, but it's actually precognitive, because it's what Andrija Puharich figured out. It's what's called negative resonance. That's a term from Roger Penrose. But by negative resonance, it's also called a quantum beat. So what a quantum beat is, it's a precognitive, formless force. And so this is what you access in meditation. And so it's been rediscovered, as it was the basis of the Nobel Prize in 2023, I think, on Bell's inequality. And my own quantum physics professor, he worked on this. He was the National Science Foundation administrator for Anton Zeilinger. Okay. Well, that's another thing why they rely on the Padma Asana, the full lotus meditation. because Qigong master Chen Yulin, he says, well, if you want to know if somebody's a real master, just see if they can sit in full lotus in ease. And if you can like sit in full lotus in ease, that proves that the qi, the energy, is working through your body channels. So what happens is you have to first fill up the second chakra or lower dantian, the energy elixir field, with the yin qi. And when you fill it up with the yin qi, and you restore your jing, or your life force energy, from like when you were a virgin, when you were 16 years old, then you can easily activate the yang qi. And then, yeah, they call it parasympathetic rebound. So that process is the vagus nerve. The right side vagus nerve is the yang qi. So that goes to the reproductive organ. So what Westerners don't understand is that yin qi energy will automatically activate the vagus nerve, the right side vagus nerve, to then trigger this blissful energy in females. And so females are yang internally as the yang jing, which is then the yin qi. And so this is how Tantra works with Kundalini, is that the male has to stay in that yang internal energy, which is actually female as yin qi, and keep building it up. And you can do this with another person, a female. If you cycle the energy as a male, you can do that. But it's just a catalyst, because like as Irma's emphasizing, the source of the energy is formless and cannot be seen. And so the criticism of Tantra and Kundalini or whatever is that it's considered like misogynistic, because you're like using the female's energy. But what in fact, it's the exact opposite, because it's proving the connection between lust and female bliss and love. Because when you keep cycling the female energy over and over, it actually ends up through that right side vagus nerve reaction. The right side vagus nerve goes to the right side of the heart. And so it will open up the heart as as what's called wan qi. So the wan qi is when you build up the yang qi enough, then the wan qi is this formless awareness force that's both inside and outside of the body at the same time, and it's through the heart. And when that wan qi activates, then that opens up the middle of the brain as the pineal gland opening up, that then activates, so you can see the Shen spirit, what they call biophotons in quantum biology. You can see that externally, and you can see spirits and astral realms and all that. But again, Ramana Maharshi emphasizes that all those astral realms are just the spiritual ego. They're not the true foundation of reality, which again cannot be seen. It can only be listened to through this process of listening that's based on what they call the three gunas of no guna. Okay. The golden body as the immortal body is what's seen externally, and then internally it's seen as blue light when you meditate. So there's this difference, like external internal dynamic. That's the difference between the spiritual ego of the person meditating and doing the healing. So like the person in the emptiness meditating, they experience it as instantaneous, but as soon as it's observed externally, it's in a different space-time reality. So that's why you have this golden light, because the golden light is actually the creation of new matter, new jing, through the virtual photons. And so like the Qigong master, like this is described, if you read the biography of H.W.L. Punja, his memoir is called Nothing Ever Happens. And it's 3 books, and it was compiled by David Godman. And so he talks about the blue light in there, like he sees the blue light, but his followers, like when it was his birthday, he went to 6 different birthday parties at the same time in India, because his followers, they all wanted him to celebrate his birthday with them. but he did not remember this at all. In other words, the formless awareness can create this energy without your spiritual ego being aware that it happens, just like in deep dreamless sleep. So in other words, yeah, that would be what they would call God or whatever, or the goddess, if you want to call it the goddess. I mean, it's in India, they called it like Kala means time, is time, but then, and Kali is the cosmic mother. So God is what they call Ishwara in India. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I like that. I was actually, what was I reading? Oh, I've been reading that book, Jesus is from Outer Space by Richard Carrier. And his whole point is that if you read Paul, the letters of Paul, Paul is actually saying that, Jesus is from outer space. I mean, it's hard to, like, from this heavenly astral realm, and he like took on a body, a physical body, but he was a part of God or whatever. But you find that same tradition in that's what they call Ishwara in India, which is essentially that any of the gods like Krishna or Buddha or Shiva or all those gods, they're all like you would any kind of real spiritual master, like a Wang Ling Ping, the Taoist master Wang Ling Ping. Oh yeah, cool. He did. He can walk through a wall. So, according to David Verdesi, he walked through a wall. Now, the only way for him to do that is that his actual physical body is a Yang Shen, which is a golden immortal body. And so, this is also what Babaji apparently, like if you study the what do they call that? The I'm trying to think of too many things at one time. But the Kriya Yoga tradition, that Babaji is like their avatar or whatever. And so he will physically appear in the Himalayas sometimes, but he's like immortal. Okay. Yeah. So my point here is that the irony is that the more like these spiritual masters, they have to destroy their mind. They have to destroy their ego essentially in order to merge back into the universe. So the universe is deciding when they can appear, the more they meditate, the less there is a personality of them as a human, because they've merged with like this cosmic cycle of time. The lunar energy is the first cosmic cycle. And so when you study alchemy, they focus on the solstices and the equinox, because when you have the solstice and the equinox, especially the first full moon, and that's why Easter is based on the first full moon after the equinox, after the spring equinox, because when you combine the full moon with that equinox or solstice energy, you get a combined strength of both the full moon energy and then the yang qi of the solstice or equinox. And so that creates like a gateway of the cosmic energy or whatever. And yeah, so eventually Raman Maharshi's point is like, well, this energy is beyond the whole physical space-time of the universe. And so in my 2012 book, I call this the trajectory of tantric technology as the strong misanthropic principle, because in science they have this concept called the anthropic principle, which is that in order for us humans to exist, everything in the universe had to be perfectly harmonized in terms of all the scientific constants that they measure and everything that enabled complex life to evolve over hundreds of millions of years, and then for humans to finally arrive. And so some scientists are arguing in terms of this techno singularity that technology is actually the real spirituality, and that the goal of science is to help the whole physical universe evolve, through technology, and eventually we're gonna colonize outer space, just like we colonized Earth through Western science. And so my argument is like, well, that's when they're doing that, they're ignoring the lunar cycle, the lunar energy. And the lunar energy is what controls ecology on Earth, because it controls the water cycles, and life is based on water, And there's this secret of water that Andrija Puharich figured out, but also Gerald Pollack is focused on it. He's still alive. And then Emilio Del Guidici, he focused on the same secret. They're calling it the fourth phase of water, which essentially means that the protons and the electrons split in the water, and that's how you access the virtual photons. And so I just posted on my blog a new paper by Jack Tuzinski, and I've emailed him. Let me find the link here. But yeah, here we go. So he basically, without, I don't know if he realizes it, but he's completely corroborated the claim of Andrija Puharich that water is the basis of memory, of long-term memory storage through these virtual photons of the protons. Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for your comments and contributions. Yeah, so like even when you meditate, like if you're fasting, obviously it's really dangerous. I mean, I can't recommend it to anybody, but it's what they call converting Jing to Shen, because when you convert Jing to Shen, you're doing it through the Qi. I don't know what I just did. Yeah. So another way I did it was using the DMT plant-based medicine. I fasted for like, I don't know, a day, and then I took this really strong what they call ayahuasca analog, which is a MAOI, and which stops the breakdown of serotonin. And then also, I think it was I used Syrian rue seeds. And this is one of the arguments of the Western Bible, that there's this guy who studied ayahuasca analogs, and he realizes that yeah, exactly, that's exactly what I did. And so he realized that the one of the early Jewish communities in Egypt, in Elephantine Egypt, was drinking halma, and halma was the secret of soma. He's arguing that soma and halma were actually oh, really? That's hilarious. I did it with a friend of mine. He's like, I'm like, I got to take some vinegar to clear out my, to purify myself. And my stomach was still too acidic. And so I just like, I puked it all up when I took the ayahuasca, and he was just laughing at me. He's like, oh, nice. I tried getting that THC drink at the booze store. I was at the booze store with my mom, and I didn't even I bought the stuff. I did not even realize it was THC until I got home. I thought it was just beer. Wow, that's serious. I didn't, yeah, like I could not even feel those THC drinks. I literally drank like 4 of them in an hour, and I could barely feel it. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, see, that's the thing, is that like I've been drinking cocoa every night, and cocoa has high levels of tryptamine in it, and I definitely get trippy dreams. I like it. Cocoa it's used in the Central America as a psychedelic, with cannabis. If you there's another thing I did when I did salvia, I had this vision of a painting. It was actually Mola art craft. And it turns out the culture that makes the Mola art craft, they're really into cannabis as a spiritual medicine. Yeah, I know. That THC drink doesn't do anything. I'm like, I don't even smoke pot and I can't even feel it. I was like, this is way too overpriced. Um anyway, so that's what my 2012 book was about was that is I test after my enlightenment experience, I tested out, psychedelics and whatever. And I agree with you. It's like you can tell it's an external Jing energy. It's electrochemical energy, and the my chi energy was able to overpower the electrochemical energy, which was very fascinating because the Wan Chi emanates out of the pineal gland, out of the center of your brain. So, like, I smoked really strong salvia, and I was in full lotus, and my spirit. What happens when people? I had friends of mine, and they would took one hit of salvia and they would never ever smoke it again because their spirit flew out of their body and flew into the floor and they completely freaked out. And what happened to me is the chi in my pineal gland overpowered the salvia and my spirit was halfway out of my body when I'm in full lotus. I took a really strong hit of salvia and I was laughing at the salvia, the chi, because like I could feel my spirit like stuck, like part of me was halfway out of my body, and I'm just like laughing because I'm using my third eye to overpower the Jing energy. So the Wan Chi is like a really strong electromagnetic force. It's like a magnetic force that you feel in the center of your brain. Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah, I don't know, cause it's yeah, the way you digest it. Like if it's smoke, it would go right in your bloodstream, I'm thinking. I don't know. Um, I mean, I didn't the only time I smoked pot, I was too freaked out by it. Like I wigged out. I was young when I did it, and ayahuasca. Yeah, I would never do LSD. I had the only people I've known who've done LSD, they've gotten like brain cancer. I'm serious. Like LSD, I think it can cause serious damage because the thing about LSD is it's higher in dopamine versus the traditional psychedelics are all based on serotonin, but LSD for some reason it also increases your dopamine. Okay. Yeah, I could see where that would like you know if you feel like there's something trying to control you or take over your spirit, then I could see why you wouldn't want to do that because that's what when I took the really strong ayahuasca, essentially I physically could not move my body. I was in full lotus for 4 hours nonstop. And I literally thought, oh, I've gone too far and I'm not going to come back. Like, this is it. I'm done with. And the other thing is, like, I thought, like, I literally thought, well, maybe if I ejaculate, that'll stop the drug, because I had this strong Kundalini reaction. I could feel, it felt like um, I felt like my pelvis was being peeled back in bliss like a shrimp. That's what it felt like. It just like ripped open. And when it got up to my skull, immediately I heard this like it's I heard like a gunshot in the center of my brain. Like I don't know if I knocked my head or something, but and then immediately I saw rainbow light. And I could not move my body. So I'd have a thought like, oh, maybe if I ejaculate, and I could not move my body to do it. Not I don't, I'm celibate, so I don't, you know. Yeah, yeah, right, exactly, because you get that dopamine. Yeah, right. Something about the natural substances. I don't know if nature's just like evolved for people to have this DMT type trip. Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah. So, I had that from the salvia too. I got a strong Kundalini bliss reaction from the salvia, and then what happened with the salvia? Oh, what was really interesting with the salvia is I when I smoked it, I would pass out, but I'd be in full lotus, so I'd wake up, I'd black out, and most people they fall over when they black out, but in full lotus, I was able to stay upright, and then I'd wake up, and so what? So then what happened is I was in a I was in my apartment and I had all the lights were off and I had a winter hat over my eyes, a thick hat, and then I had my eyes closed and I took a strong hit of the salvia in full lotus. I got the kundalini energy up into the brain and then all of a sudden I saw a light. I saw a rainbow light and I quick put my hand in front of my face with my eyes closed in the pitch black dark with a hat covering my eyes, and I saw rainbows around my hand, like a rainbow aura around my hand. And then I was like, "Wow, I actually did it!" I opened the third eye with the salvia, and then it immediately just vanished. Like it wore off, and so I think they can definitely be used as a tool. In fact, even in our original human culture, the San Bushmen, they use some kind of plant medicine, and nobody really knows what it is. I tried to track it down, and they said that it's not the real thing. That it was just like a tool that they would use to help initiate it at first, and it was considered to be part of this like what it wasn't the real numb energy. So and then there's a story about who is it, I can't remember, the guy who just passed away recently, but his guru, I read his biography of the guru. It's something love is in the biography, the title of the book, love, something love and miracle, something about that. I can see his face. I can't remember his name, but it's not Muktananda. It's like it started with a B. But anyway, there's the famous story about how they brought him a bunch of LSD and it had no effect on him. Like he took like several hits of LSD at the same time, and he like he's anyway. Well, that's like Chen Lin. He said he had to take a deadly poison to clear out his body channels. And now when he meditates, he always sees light in his lower dantian, behind his navel. But he did not always see light before he took this deadly poison. And he didn't say what it was, but he did it to clear out his energy channels. And I don't know whether he did it in China or in the US. I couldn't tell the way he was telling the story, because it seemed like he did it fairly recently, like when he told us the story, but I don't know, so obviously that's they are. And the other thing is that the shiitake mushroom that I grow, that's considered to be very powerful chi. It has good chi energy, and it's medicinal. If you think about it, the lentinin, it causes a rash. When you grow the shiitake mushroom in the forest, like I grow it on actual oak trees or trees, it's a much stronger, concentrated um, mushroom, and so yeah. We're all gonna leave our bodies. Could happen at any time, and obviously breathing, you need to breathe. But the other thing about yogis, like there's these stories of advanced yogis in like India where they can go underwater. They can and Chinny Lin, like even the San Bushmen, the original human culture, they say their heart stops in the advanced level. They're like, no, literally we die, our hearts stop. And the person interviewing was like, are you just mean, and they're like, no, we mean literally. And Chen Yilin described that same experience. He said, I don't recommend this to anybody, but my heart, he said he was walking around just fine for 2 hours and he had no heartbeat at all. And it just, the chi was powering his body. And so, That's what Ramana Maharshi described as his eternal liberation. What he called eternal liberation was after his heart had stopped for 15 minutes. So when he had been meditating nonstop for 9 years before that experience happened. Now, if you study the Westerners who study Ramana Maharshi, they will not admit that that was necessary, because Westerners, again, were very materialistic. So, like, I talked to David Godman about this about 20 years ago on his website or his forum or whatever. And he's like, no, Ramana Maharshi was already, completely enlightened. He didn't need to do that. When he was 16 years old, he experienced himself as dying. But Ramana Maharshi's point is that you can go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is what they call breathless ecstasy. Sri Yukteswar called it breathless ecstasy. And so your body fills up with this Wan Chi. When the Wan Chi gets powerful enough, even the top of your skull will open up. The fontanelle will open up like a baby. And that's how you do astral travel, like real astral travel. Yeah. So, well, you think about it, like I actually had this conversation with a relative of mine recently, and I said, each of us has a ghost inside of us, and it leaves our body, when we pass on. And I'm like, the question is, what powers the ghost when the ghost is floating around? And she just said, Jesus. And I go, well, because I was talking about time. You can't see what powers the light, and so in that sense, it's not materialistic at all. But at the same time, it's eternal awareness. It's alive because it's consciousness. Yeah. So this thing about breathless, what's really fascinating is that you're the centers, like what I experience is the center of my palms and the center of my feet were pulsating with the chi. So the chi actually pulsates and breathes on its own. And what you then experience, I experienced this really strong fluid, what they call amrita, which is that, the ambrosia is what it's called in Taoist alchemy. But essentially, when they talk about biju in energy feasting in Taoist alchemy, which is like, we would call it fasting, right? But when the energy takes over, I didn't realize that it was connected to my celibacy because I was too naive. I was too westernized. I just started the training. And so I'm like, well, somehow this water is, I haven't had anything to drink, in a week, pretty much. I just had half a glass of water, but I'm experiencing this constant flow of water coming down from the center of my brain. So, and then this pulsating of my skull, the skull had opened up and was pulsating. And I'm like, there must be some reverse electrolysis going on where the hydrogen and oxygen is recombining and creating water, for me to live off of. And then I realized, every chemical that our body needs, it could just be recreated from this energy, and that's essentially what they did. This, I later, after I came out of my intensive training, after I experienced this space-time vortex, and I just freaked out after that. I'm like, I got to find out what happened to me. And that it's explained in chapter 11 of the Taoist Yoga book. And I didn't realize, because I couldn't imagine I'd gone that far in the training, I thought I was like at chapter 6, but I mean, that's the other thing, is you can kind of bounce around and so essentially your spirit has to be powered by the Wan Chi. So you're creating this Wan Chi bubble around your spirit. And so later on, I called this the difference between special relativity and general relativity. Because in special relativity, you're having a constant speed that's maintained. And that's essentially what you're doing with this Wan Chi energy, is the spirit then is maintained at the speed of light, And so, because what happens is that your internal experience is different than the external experience of your spirit inside and outside your body in terms of the frequency. And so, it's an impersonal energy that you're accessing. And so, like, Qigong Master Chen Yulin, he calls it embodying the emptiness. And so through the heart, you have that Wan Qi that you then access, but then you're building it up and it comes out through it emanates out of the pineal gland in the center of the brain. And then it gets stored in the small intestines, which is the lower dantian. And so even our original human culture, they say the strongest source of ngum in the body is the small intestines. So that's where this stuff gets really weird, because most of us, we don't want to have anything to do with our small intestines, because that's like that's the dirtiest part of your body. But that's why the fasting and Master Nanhua Chin, he says, you're not going to see the light unless you've, cleared out your colon first, and that's why, like, monks will not eat after noon, because, they gotta, like, basically what they call that modified Bigu diet, where you're basically like what, now they call it intermittent fasting. So it's become kind of trendy. And even, like, there's medical doctors now that say, well, if you want to prevent cancer, you need to fast. You need to do intermittent fasting, like at least once a week, where you don't eat breakfast and let your body just autophagy is what they call it. So and at any rate, so they did a study of this Bigu, what they call in Qigong Bigu, and this energy feasting. It was done by Rustam Roy, and he was a chemistry professor, and he's from India originally, but he was a Western, like, well-known Western scientist, and so he organized this conference, and he even had his own journal, the Bulletin of Science and Technology, or something like that. And the students of Yan Shin, Qigong Master Yan Shin, some of them went into Bigu spontaneously, so they stopped eating food. And I would have loved to have done that. I mean, I was in Bigu and my energy was the strongest it had ever been. In fact, I accidentally pulled this lady's spirit out of her skull without touching her. This older lady asked me for healing. I never touched her, and I felt this strong magnetic blob get pulled out of the top of her skull. And I had forgotten that Chen Yulin said never pull energy blockages out of the top center of somebody's skull. And he never said why, because I'm like a why guy. I need to know why, so I forgot about it, and I did it by accident. And I immediately, she couldn't see what I was doing, and she immediately burst out bawling. And she kept bawling for like 15 minutes, and somebody was comforting her, with their hand around her. And I felt terrible about it. And she saw me later and she smiled at me because she realized I just made a innocent mistake. But I stopped meditating soon after that, because that's also later on, soon after I experienced the space-time vortex. And so my point is, like, you have to keep the Wan Qi stored up to surround your spirit. And if you overuse your energy, and then your spirit leaves your body without enough Wan Qi surrounding it, and the Wan Qi is this impersonal force that kind of like stabilizes the information of your spirit. And so if you don't have that connection with the impersonal Wan Qi, then it causes us, literally the room was spinning around me, but it was a space-time vortex. So the Wan Qi is also space-time, as gravity. And that's why when you go deep into meditation, you have levitation. So there's this guy, the Saint Joseph de Cupertino, and there's a professor in New York, Michael Grosso, and I've corresponded with him on his blog. And he discovered, he was in Italy, he discovered the book in Italian, and so then he got it translated, and then he studied this guy, and so he has another book called I can't remember the title of the book, but The Man Who Could Fly. And so it's a really great book, because essentially The Catholic Church, they did not know what to do with Saint Joseph de Cupertino. There's been a movie made about him, reenactment, but there's all these testimonials that are complaining about his ability to levitate. It's not that they don't believe he can levitate; they just disagree with his ability to levitate. They're totally against it, and so then they would lock him up in a room essentially. But they didn't realize that by locking him up in a room, he's just building up his energy more. So then when they take him out, he's just going to levitate again. It's pretty funny. And so Chen Yilin said, when he said in 2000 at our conference, the level 3 conference, he said that when he got out of the cave, he levitated up 9 feet. Oh, okay. Hey, thanks, Irma. All right, great. Yeah, I was thinking about doing the class again, but I don't know. I've been doing the Total Gym a lot, so thanks for getting me going on the Total Gym. It's been a life-changing experience too. Okay, interesting. John of Shanghai. Wait, there was an Orthodox Christian saint in Shanghai, China? Would that be like a Jesuit in China? Interesting. Seraphim of Sarvav. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, the levitation thing, obviously, there's, for example, Chen Yilin mentioned how the guy who's in charge of Falun Gong, he claims he could levitate, but he's like, they wanted him to demonstrate his levitation ability. He couldn't do it. And the thing is, obviously, if you're going to be able to levitate, you have to build up your energy. Like John Chang, if you read one of the books about John Chang, he demonstrated levitation to the guy who wrote the book. But then John Chang goes, I couldn't levitate very well because I'm inside and the carpet is blocking the Earth's energy. Now that's really interesting. That brings me back to the original focus here, is that the yin qi of the Earth. Qigong master F.E.P. Chow would talk about this too. She was the first Qigong master I experienced, and she blew the fuse in the room behind us at St. Mary's University in 1995. And she said the secret of her energy was always to connect with the earth. She always had to visualize her spirit going down into the earth and grounding herself. And when she did that, she could add the energy of anybody else to her own energy. So she would you can watch her on YouTube doing demonstrations where like really strong guys would push her around, right? Because she was like a really little lady, but then she would just shift her energy and she would focus it down into the earth, and then she would add their energy to her own, and then they could not push her. And it was, it's hard to believe when you watch it, but essentially what you're doing there is I'm losing the Wi-Fi connection. Anyway, yeah, so you're like I said, you have to build up the yin qi in order to activate the wan qi. You have to first connect with the lunar energy through the earth with the water. And yeah, so I'm just saying, like they're saying, like the Falun Gong guy, they're saying, well, the practices he teaches are legitimate, but whether he's real or not is questionable. That's the problem with all this stuff, is that that's why they rely on full lotus. They're like, well, if you can sit in full lotus, the longer you can sit in full lotus in ease, if you can sit in full lotus in ease, that shows that your energy channels are open, because the yin qi is what opens up the body energy channels. And okay, so I'm gonna tune out pretty soon here. I had a warning about a bad connection. Okay. Yeah. Sure. That'd be cool. Yeah, just post a comment on my channel whenever you want to, connect. Just post a comment, and I'll probably get your comment. Like sometimes YouTube sometimes they don't tell you, but I usually check my comment section and then just say when you want. I'm pretty open. My schedule's pretty open. Um, yeah, my main thing is helping out my mom. Actually, all my yin chi energy goes into my mom. What the extra energy I have. So I'm my life is based on her schedule because she's turning 90. So I help her out. So, yeah, but you know, I'd be happy to chat on a live stream. We can do a live stream. We do have Zoom here, so we could probably do Zoom too, but yeah, right on. Well, thanks for your comments. And um I'm the crazy uncle, so I don't have I used to help out with when their kids were younger. But yeah, so I'll sign off. I think I've said what I wanted to say pretty much, but my focus has been on environmental activism in combination with the meditation. So I worked at Clean Water Action for 10 years, and the lunar energy and the water. I mean, we have a freshwater crisis now on Earth where something I wrote about in 25 years ago. I had a op-ed published called "The Global Water Crisis Sucks Us into Revolution," and 25 years ago, there was somebody wrote a response letter saying I was bonkers or whatever, like a business school major, and so anyway, I mean, now this is what the science predicted, was that in 25 years, in the year 2000, in 25 years, we would have a global water crisis, and um it's become even worse now with the AI data centers, like using a huge amount of water to cool off their data processing. And yeah, and then of course, like just the use of water in the West, like in the non-Western cultures, they would compost the human manure, but in the West, we use clean fresh water to then you get like cities like LA where they got to try to clean out their used clean water. They have to recycle their water. It's it all started because of these shallow street sewers in Rome. They had to build aqueducts because they polluted their drinking water with shallow street sewers. But if you go to Morocco, like I visited the most traditional Berber village left in Morocco back in 1997, and they composted all their human manure, and they use that to grow their food. So the West, they think they're civilized by having these sewers with the water, using fresh water to flush away. But in the non-Western cultures, now they're calling it ecological sanitation, because the UN and Scandinavia, Sweden and Finland, and they realize that composting is actually, you don't use, you're not required to use any fresh water to pollute. You don't have any wastewater or sewage or whatever. And so the water crisis, it's really tied up into this like patriarchal kind of control of Mother Nature, the flowing of water. And then, of course, Bruce Lee, that was his big thing. It was like, be like water. But the lunar energy controlling the water, of course, with global warming, I mean, it's really about the ocean heat. And Yeah, so there's a lot to it. Like that's been my focus is environmental activism. So the thing about like meditation is because it's been part of like India is really the basis of Western the Brahmin Vedic culture is actually from Western Asia with the farming and the chariots and all that. And I mean, science. Like we rely on science, obviously, and that's why I got into the non-commutativity because that's actually telling us the truth of science as the non-Western truth of reality. And but it also shows why mainstream science has caused our ecological crisis because it's our mainstream science is all based on commutative symmetric space-time. And when you have symmetric space-time with commutative geometry, then the technology you're creating is inherently going against this lunar definition of time with the sun. So the lunar energy, you have that inherent asymmetry that's a dance between the sun and the moon. Because what I found, like if you read my 2012 book, there's this guy David Ewing Duncan, and he wrote a book called Calendar, and he points out that the development of the phonetic writing system has to do with the mathematics of the solar calendar, because in the original farming cultures they're trying to subtract the lunar calendar from the solar calendar to try to make them line up, because their idea of harmony was like, well, if we can resonate the lunar and the solar calendar by making them line up so we can cancel them out. In order to do that, we have to do the mathematics of the cycles, just like the Mayan calendar. You know, they talk about like I don't know if it's like 19 years when they try to line up the solar and lunar calendar. So they could not do the mathematics using, just like when if you try to use Roman numerals to do mathematics, it just doesn't work. It's just a big mess. And so in the West, when they developed the phonetic alphabet, then they were able to start doing what they call it in mathematics. They actually call it the Brahmin cipher, and the Brahmin cipher is the definition of zero as a commutative geometry process of mathematics with phonetic symbols. And so then you have to have a one-to-one correspondence between the geometric symbol and the number as arithmetic. And once you set that up, then you're able to then create, what they call the Greek miracle of incommensurability, which is this the commutative geometry as an irrational number. So you're basically saying, well, you have this infinite time as a process, but it's actually a divide and average process. And because it's a divide and average process, therefore, you can create an infinitesimal, however you say that word, for the derivative or for the calculus and all that. So what they found in quantum physics is that you have the future and the past overlapping, and it cannot be a calculus because you cannot define it as a spatial point that doesn't move. So you have to have eternal motion as the future and the past overlapping, because whenever you make an external measurement, it takes time to make the measurement, and so that the time has to be included as part of the measurement. And by including the time in the measurement, you have something that's faster than the speed of light, because it's instantaneous, but not as an external measurement. It's instantaneous from the future. And this is what is called non-locality in quantum physics. And so I was able to correspond with Professor Basil J. Hiley for several years up till 2023. And he said he loved my music article after I told him I loved his article. And so that's what we focused on. And I'm gonna leave it at that. So thanks for hanging out.